I do want to hear what you two think about specifically the growth of film communities outside of New York, Los Angeles, and I guess Georgia at this point.
I mean, I think incentives have a lot to do with it. There's some mid-sized production companies that aren't, Warner Brothers or Universal, that mid-sized companies that are looking for the best incentive packages. So those states that have great incentives are what mid-sized independent production companies are looking for in a production location. And New Mexico has a wonderful incentive package. So we get a lot of business here. What we need to focus on is infrastructure and building more sound stages, because the demand is so high, but there's not enough sound stages to supply the demand. So it's an economics thing. I think it's important in storytelling to tell stories where they took place, if that makes sense. Somebody had pitched me an idea for a story that takes place in New York, like upstate New York. But they called me and said, "Oh, what are the incentives like in New Mexico to film this movie there?" And it's like, we have some looks that could be upstate New York. We have desert, we have forest, we have mountains, we have city. But I really feel like production should take place where the stories are being told.
I agree.
Unless it's like an exact match here in New Mexico. I'm always pushing New Mexico for people to come film. But I think that has a big part in it. So the production companies who are fundraising for a project, and wanting certain locations to save them as much money with rebates and if it's debt financing through a rebate, that kind of thing. That's really important when it comes to kind of regional and outside of the major markets, and how the growth is going to take place. So I think with the strike and the big, the strikes with the writers and the actors, and seeing the effect on the industry right now with the major studio systems, these smaller markets, I think, are going to see a lot more business, whether there's a great incentive or not, based on not wanting to shoot it, on a Warner Brothers lot or Amazon.
Nobody wants to do that. Well, actually, people
Right.
do want to do it, but
They do.
not always for good reasons.
Yeah.
And I agree with Ivan.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Just to top that off is, Ben, as you know, I was in Seattle, and that was a huge thing in Seattle. Sure, aside from Sleepless in Seattle and Singles and a couple of other great movies, you see TV productions, you see films based in Seattle, and they're filmed in Vancouver. It's a long-standing story, and people are tired of it. What are they doing about it? I'm not quite sure. And I'm really not going to speak too much about that because, one, I'm not living there anymore. And two, I'm just not caught up to the politics of it all, because I do think it's a more political thing. I think people are trying, but I'm not quite sure how they're trying it. I respect all my colleagues in Seattle. They're hardworking. There's talent across the state in that state. And if it wasn't for, I forget the zombie movie. God, that's embarrassing. Thank you, Z. Thank you, Z Nation. If that wasn't there, I feel like nothing would have happened for those Seattle crew and talent. And that's a shame. So, I mean, moving down to New Mexico for me was a personal thing, but also a professional thing, because we do have those incentives. I know we have the talent and the crew that live here, that work here, that were raised here. And that's what they want, is just to, we don't want our crews here to be replaced by LA crews. That's not the point. We have the crew here, the crews and the talent here. How can we keep them sustainable with work coming in? And Ivan hit it on the head. We have to create that infrastructure. We cannot just rely on one gigantic streaming service to provide it for us. We have to be the creators of our own destiny, right? So.
No, I mean, so I've shot something recently in Spokane, which was partially how I knew Z Nation. Same production company. but the North by Northwest is great. I would recommend them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The just one thing, going back to what you were saying about why would anybody try to match upstate New York when it has one of the best film tax incentives, especially if you're smart about how you use it in outside of New York City?
Yeah,
That seems so silly to me.
Yeah.
it is. It is. They're looking for the best deals, and
Yeah.
things are cheaper in New Mexico. Hotel rates are cheaper, and rentals for gear are cheaper than the
I mean,
major.
Rochester is not that expensive, to be honest with you. It's very different from New York City, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's also, the film offices, how easy are they to work with,
Yeah.
and do they want you? Are they welcoming? Do they take care of you and your production? I have a friend who, was shooting a $70 million television miniseries here for one of the majors before the strike. And it seemed like they got his business. He came to town, and he has shot here many times before, major feature films. And upon departure, I was with him at the airport, and he's like, God, it didn't seem like the film office was taking care of things like they were in the past, and that bothered me. So I talked to the film office with some connections and kind of just filled them in on what the comments were. And I said, we need to make sure this is corrected. And it's a team effort with communication and service, and it really does
Relationships.
include everyone. It's the relationships of the matter. So this producer director felt comfortable enough talking to me about that, and because we built a great relationship over the past 20 years. And he knows that I know a lot of people in the state that I can communicate it to professionally without it being a complaint. And I'm just making sure that we step it up a little more with that production when it comes back. I'm not sure that, there are people in the industry who are kind of assigned to, whether it's a film office for the state or a city, that are actually qualified to be in those positions. And I know there's been those cases over the years here in New Mexico where it's been, people assigned to a position because, they went to high school with the current mayor or something like that, when there's better people for the position. And really, it comes down to taking care of people and massaging that relationship and making sure that, people know that if they're bringing a production to your state, that they're going to be well taken care of. We're in a great position in New Mexico because the crew base here is some of the most experienced in the world. And they have a great training program. There's a really strong union president right now, when it comes to the crew with IATSE Local 480. And, they're just ready to go all the time.
Right.
Infrastructure is a thing. We need some investors to come in and build, 30 more sound stages, not just here in Albuquerque, but throughout the state, and make sure that we have, what the demand is.
Yeah. But, that's a two-way street too, though, Ivan. We can help those productions coming and sustain a really great relationship. But what are those productions going to do for us? And I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is a really great example of those productions giving back to the state of New Mexico, which I think that's what we want to keep doing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, so Stu Lyons is a AFMX alumni. I introduced him to the Seattle Film Summit, and I think he's, probably there right now if it's going on right now.
I think so, yeah.
So Stu was the line producer of Breaking Bad. He moved up to executive producer of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He also did The Night Shift. He did the Cleaning Lady pilot.
Yeah.
He's 6 for 6 on pilots that are shot here in New Mexico going to series.
Great man.
As the producer. And so he took great pride, and I think the state and everybody involved with Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul took great pride in 90% of the crew was from New Mexico.
Yep.
Which is absolutely unheard of, in a lot of other states, because they don't have the crew that's experienced. It kept these people busy for 13 years between the two shows.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the problem with film tax incentives in general, is that most of the time the productions are pretty easy to move. And if the tax incentive dries up, or if somebody just has a beef with that film commission or anything like that, it can be extraordinarily easy to basically to scare away that production, and that helps no one.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
it's nice to hear that New Mexico's incentive is built more, at least results in more long-term growth and more establishment of IPs that want to stay in New Mexico.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, Vince Gilligan is just like, he's a genius. And you know, everybody that works with him and under him, you know, in any production, I just think it's a real success story. And thank goodness Vince has become, you know, a New Mexico supporter, lover, you know, he might as well live here in the state because, you know,
Right.
those productions take place here. And you know, it's just a testament to people like Vince and Stu Lyons. You know, Stu took it very seriously, you know, in conversations with him over the years of taking care of the local crew, not bringing people in from other states, and, you know,
Right.
really showcasing the talent that we have here. When he won his Emmy, you know, one of his Emmys for Breaking Bad, you know, the first thing he did was came back to New Mexico and called all of his crew together, you know, before production started so he could share in that Emmy win with them, you
That's
know.
awesome.
And he just, it's like, it was like the Stanley Cup. Every player got to have the Stanley
Cool.
Cup for like a day or two. And it was the
Uh-huh.
same with the Emmy Awards with all the cast and crew here in New Mexico. And
Right.
people just absolutely love Stu Lyons. So what that does for future productions, if he is the producer on it, he already has the established base of crew that he knows he can fill for any production, small or large, because
Right.
everybody wants to work for him. It's all in how you treat people and how you get the job done. He's the only line producer that did not, or producer that did not miss one day of work for the entire 6 seasons of Breaking Bad.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Didn't
That's
miss one
amazing.
day of work. And that
That's
That's
motivates
professional.
people.
Yeah.
So
But
when we have,
another component to that, though, I want to add is yes, there's the producers, there are the crew, but really what we want to foster more, I would like to see more of, is the content creators. You know, and that's why we have the pitch panel. That was a great success in Seattle Film Summit. That I pitched, no pun intended, to Ivan about having the pitch panel here in Albuquerque. And last year it was a great success. It really woke up the community, and maybe in a very small way, to say, hey, bring your ideas. We want to help you craft them. We're bringing it back again this year, and we're really excited to do that through the festival. The New Mexico Film Office is also, I was really excited, little self promotion here, but last year they brought the Stowe Story Lab to New Mexico, and the efforts to encourage, foster, and support content creators here in the state of New Mexico. That was one thing I've always wanted to do. That was a life goal I submitted. I was really happy that my writing partner, Lorraine Montez, and I got in there. Jamie Jung is actually in it this year, which I'm really excited about. But man, didn't that just wake up the writers here? Like, wow, people are investing in this talent, the writing talent, the content creating talent in New Mexico. Because, like, going back to what Ivan said earlier, if we had more Southwest-based stories based here, you know, flourishing from here, what could that do for our state just across the board? You see all these stories that are based in California and New York or somewhere. How many people are really going to relate to that? There's everything in between that we can talk about. So content creators, that's the next step for us.
I agree. I don't specifically know for New Mexico, but I agree most regional film communities hit a tipping point where the only truly sustainable way to grow is to grow the writers and the above the line people to be local, as well as the outside productions that bring money and work for the rest of the crew to keep them employed. It's it's hard to tell exactly where that line changes. But I think that it's often under emphasized in
Yeah.
I
the
totally
state and center.
agree. So, you know, one thing we're working on through the festival is the relationships we have with mid-level production companies that are looking to expand. You know, we're saying New Mexico is open for business in your expansion, and using our connections to make sure the right people are brought on for that expansion of their companies. And it's been pretty successful. So, you know, the content creation is key above the line. We have that here. It's a matter of getting them work. And but there also needs to be funding for projects. And that's one thing. New
Yeah.
Mexico, economically, compared to LA or New York, there's not as much money. You know, there's pockets
Yeah.
of wealth here. But you know, they're not going to fund, you know, 10 million projects. So having the funding for projects in a region, you know, really comes down to relationships and people contributing to a film fund that you know, is going to take care of local talent and writers and getting their projects made. So we're certainly focused on that and working on that, you know, through the festival and in the state of New Mexico.
No, I think that that's a it's really vital if your end goal is to establish a fourth US film hub, with the other three being LA, New York, and Georgia, Atlanta specifically. Then you really need to be focusing more on bringing your outside or growing your local creators as well as bringing outside ones in, but it does need to happen to both.